Up next in the broadcast, South Korea condemns Japanese Prime Minister Abe's visit to a war shrine that glorifies its past colonial aggressions and enshrines war criminals. Korail officials and union leaders sit down for talks to end the longest rail strike in the nation's history, while the finance minister calls the rail operators' over 100-year monopoly the real problem. Egypt's military-backed interim government declares the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist group and threatens punishment to anyone who is a member. Primetime News begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Thursday, December 26th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's controversial visit to a war shrine that honors leaders and followers of past military atrocities.
His surprise move has infuriated neighboring countries like Korea and China, prompting them to lodge strong complaints. Han Da-eun has our top story.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe marked the anniversary of his first year in office by visiting the Yasukuni War Shrine in Tokyo on Thursday morning. It's the first time a sitting prime minister has visited the controversial site since Junichiro Koizumi's visit in 2006. The Yasukuni Shrine honors 2.5 million Japanese war dead, including some convicted war criminals. Abe had previously steered clear of the shrine for fear of further damaging regional ties, choosing instead to send donations. But the possibility of a visit has always lingered due to the prime minister's strong nationalism and hawkish foreign policies. Abe told reporters on his way out that he was paying respects to those who sacrificed their lives for Japan and that he had no intention of upsetting the people of Korea or China. He added that he hoped to have a chance to explain his actions to the leaders of both neighboring countries. The trip is certain to worsen Japan's already soured relations with Korea and China, both of which were quick to respond. Korea's Culture Minister Jung called Abe's behavior anachronistic.
The Korean government can't help but express deep regret and anger over Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit, defying concerns from neighboring countries. The Yasukuni Shrine harbors war criminals and eulogizes Japan's imperialism.
Yu added Japan should acknowledge its past wrongdoing and build trust with its neighbors, starting with a sincere apology. Korean Vice Foreign Minister Kim Kyu-hyun summoned Takashi Kurai, the deputy chief of the Japanese embassy in Seoul, to relay Seoul's concerns. China's foreign ministry also condemned Abe's visit in a statement, while the U.S. expressed disappointment, saying it could escalate regional tensions. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
For an expert take on Prime Minister Abe's visit to Yasukuni War Shrine and its impact on the Korea-Japan relations, we are joined by Professor Gi-woong at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies on the line. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
Well, Professor, the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe did not visit the Yasukuni War Shrine during his first stint as Prime Minister, but he did this time. Were you surprised of his move?
Yes, I was really surprised when I think of Prime Minister Abe's moves after he was inaugurated, but it was possible to expect that he would visit Yasukuni Shrine again. He had his staff perform the ritual at Yasukuni Shrine last summer, and he also expressed regret for failing to personally perform the ritual at the shrine in 2007 when he was under his first term as Japanese Prime Minister. His moves showed that Abe's recognition of history is anachronistic, and his moves not only hurt the sentiments of Northeast Asian people, which suffered from Japanese colonial rule, but also dampened the stability and cooperation in Northeast Asia.
Now, Dr. Jung, although Abe said he had no intention of hurting the sentiments of Japan's neighbors, but his visit has prompted a sharp rebuke from Korea and China. What is your outlook on the possible effect it could have on the diplomatic state of things in the region?
Well, I'm sorry to say to this, but that kind of excuse is nothing but a wordplay. Not only Korea, but also China expressed strong protest and serious condemnation to Japan. And one more thing is that this time, Abe's visit to Yasukuni Shrine also made the United States take the opposition. Abe's visit to Yasukuni Shrine raises the questions regarding Japan's attitude toward the universal values of human rights. Though the United States needs Japan's cooperation to solve the regional problems in Northeast Asia and to implement its world strategy, the United States cannot ignore the response and public opinion of the world society. So I might say that it was a bad strategy that Abe visited Yasukuni Shrine, and frankly speaking, I cannot understand why he keeps doing such strategically improper actions. In this vein, the Northeast Asian countries have no way but to go to the sea of controversy if they fail to find a cause to have a kind of cooling off period. I hope that this kind of problem can be solved quite soon.
Well, the South Korean government today said that the visit would be met with some severe repercussions should President Park Geun-hye continue her hardline stance toward Japan. And does this really tie her hands in terms of advancing Korea-Japan relations?
Yes, Korean Foreign Ministry already called in Takashi Korail, the deputy chief of the Japanese embassy in Seoul, to lodge a strong complaint. And President Park Geun-hye, we remember that she already came up with a specific reason why she cannot meet with the Japanese Prime Minister when she met the United States Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel on the last day of September this year. So for a while, it is expected that Korean government has no way but to take hardline stance towards Japan. And Abe is expressing his intention to meet with the President of Korea, and also Japan wants to contribute to the international community under the names of so-called active pacifism, but we cannot but question if he truly thinks he can promote peace with such wrong historical views and doing such anachronistic actions.
All right, Dr. Jung, thank you very much for joining us. That was Dr. Gi-woong, Research Fellow at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies.
Thank you for having me on.
And moving now to the country's rail strike that is now in its 18th day.
There is a new development that could bring about an end to the conflict between the state-run railway operator Korail and the railway union. All right, Kim Ji-yeon has the latest.
Korail CEO Choi Eun-hae and the railway union's deputy leader Park Tae-man sat for talks on Thursday. The meeting is the second since the railway declared an indefinite walkout on December 9th, the first one coming 13 days ago. During the talks, the railway union reportedly demanded that 5 changes be made to Korail. First, it requested the withdrawal of a plan to form a subsidiary that will manage New Korea train express routes departing from southern Seoul. The second is to halt the granting of operating licenses to corporations of the new operator. And if they are granted, the language should clearly state the move has nothing to do with the privatization of the railway. Other demands include the immediate end to police arrests and the prosecution of union members, and the formation of a committee under the Transport Ministry that would deal with issues relating to improving the management of the railway. An hour ahead of the meeting, Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok released a statement which said the continuation of the railway strike is taking a heavy toll on the economy. He added it will eventually drag down the nation's economic recovery, pointing to the railway operator's debts of nearly $17 billion.
The country's railways have been run by one entity without competition for the past 114 years, and this has led to it being poorly managed. We believe the competition among public entities could reduce fares and increase the quality of railway operations in the future.
Amid the talks, the rail strike continues. The state-run rail operator on its website said it would be hiring 660 new employees to mitigate the impact. Passenger train services are running at about 70% of normal levels, while freight train services have been reduced to around 30% of normal levels. Meanwhile, the union has called for a large-scale protest in Seoul on Saturday. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And the longest strike in the country's rail history is prompting experts to scrutinize the financial health of Korail, which has a monopoly on the country's rail system.
Our Yulian explains why the government is taking such a tough stance.
The overhaul of Korail, the operator of Korea's railway monopoly, has emerged as a test case for the government's determination to rein in the lax management of debt-ridden state companies. That's because the state-run railroad operator saw its debt triple in the past 8 years to over $16 billion. Despite the piling debt, however, Korail has continued to pay out bonus payments and raised wages of its employees by more than 5% every year since 2005. The wage increases came during a period when the company was posting an average annual operating loss of $470 million. Critics say Korail symbolizes the inefficient and lax management that pushed the finances of state companies and other public organizations to dangerous levels. The government says it is determined to tackle the issue as it fears that the snowballing debts in public institutions have emerged as a serious risk to Korea's economy. Korail, government officials say, urgently needs to improve its efficiency and that a competition with a subsidiary will be the first step. But unionized workers, which is on a longest ever strike in the nation's railway history, is vehemently opposing the idea of setting up a subsidiary, calling it a scheme to eventually privatize the company. There's no sign when the railway strike will end, but how the conflict will be resolved will certainly set the course for future restructuring of the nation's public sector. Yurian, Arirang News.
At Korea's National Assembly, rival political parties are hurrying to pass next year's budget bill as well as a spy agency reform bill before the end of the year.
Our National Assembly correspondent Kim Hyun-ji reports on the last-minute push.
The National Assembly is operating with a new sense of urgency as it aims to pass a number of bills before the year's end. Some are approved on Thursday in a full assembly session, including a special bill aimed at giving more financial support to small-sized firms so they can grow bigger and more competitive. The ruling and opposition party leaders of a special parliamentary committee to reform the National Intelligence Service continued to hash out the details Thursday, one day after the rival parties agreed to pass the 2014 budget bill and a NIS reform plan this coming Monday. The Christmas Day deal, however, did not include an agreement on other key legislation. The Saenuri Party demanded the main opposition party help pass bills that seek to facilitate foreign investment and tourism in the country. President Park called for their passage earlier this month, saying they are necessary to revive the sluggish economy and provide momentum for a recovery. The Democratic Party, however, called for prohibiting efforts to privatize the state-run rail operator, Korail, asking that it be put into law. The 7,600-member railroad union has been striking for nearly 3 weeks in protest of the government setting up a subsidiary company that will run a new high-speed train line from southeast of Seoul to the southern port city of Busan. The railroad union says the move is part of the government's plan to eventually privatize national rail services. The government says it has no intention of doing so. While the rival parties failed to reach a consensus over these issues Wednesday, they are continuing discussions about the bills in the respective standing committees. As for next year's budget bill, the rival parties have cleared the way for about 2/3 of 120 government business projects that are pending, most of them pertaining to job creation and the creative economy. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
The Seoul is downplaying the most recent criticisms of President Park Geun-hye to come out of Pyongyang.
The North's Committee for the Peaceful Reunification of Korea said through state-run television that the Park administration's inter-Korean trust-building process is no different from former President Lee Myung-bak's hardline policy. Deputy spokesperson for Seoul's Unification Ministry, Park Soo-jin, said Thursday that the remarks were likely made to distract from the uncertainty that emerged from the execution of Kim Jong-un's uncle, Chang Sung-taek.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features is on the rise. Closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature, circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report, less than
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Came on to news. We're trying to cover up the South.
Korean consumers remained confident in December, although they appeared to have some doubts about certain aspects of the economy. The Bank of Korea says that its consumer sentiment index came in at 107 for December, unchanged from the previous month when it hit a 33-month high. The index is a barometer of consumer outlook on the economy, with a reading above 100 meaning that optimists outnumber pessimists. Consumers seemed hesitant, however, when it came to the outlook for the next 6 months. That figure dropped 1 point from November, and the one measuring their general outlook for the economy in the future fell 2 points. The Korean government is set to move forward with its plans to realize a creative economy to kick-drive growth. While many are scratching their heads about the effectiveness so far, our Ujinju reports that Korea should be able to expect to see some tangible results by the end of next year.
President Baek has been putting great emphasis on her vision for a creative economy since her inauguration in February as part of efforts to create more jobs and new growth engines. Many people were skeptical about the plan in the beginning, saying it lacked substance. But it seems now that the nation will be able to start seeing some tangible results from the plan by the end of next year, as the Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning is expected to give shape to plans first made in June. A major part of the plan involves setting up a research and development fund worth roughly $118 million to ensure that technologies developed by research institutions lead to businesses. The fund is expected to be in place until 2018. The Science Ministry also hopes to improve cooperation with the private sector. The government will set up a public-private council and bureau to seek specific projects on the creative economy and enhance regulations to foster new growth industries. The government is also expected to devise a plan for the broadcasting industry, the first in 14 years, to further develop the sector. The Korea Communications Commission and the Science Ministry will start discussing ways to ease regulations on broadcast media ads and unify regulations imposed on paid TV channels. The government has also increased its budget for science and technology development for next year by 2.2% compared to this year to $11 billion. The budget is expected to be spent on space launch vehicle development, lunar exploration technology, and the creation of venture firms based on newly developed technologies. But whether the government's 2014 budget proposal will pass the National Assembly and when still remains as a variable, with the opposition party demanding cuts in the budget for President Baek's key pledges. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
Just 6 months ago, the Muslim Brotherhood controlled pretty much every aspect of Egypt's political system. Now that's all gone, and the interim government's designation of the Brotherhood as a terrorist organization looks to be the final nail in the Islamist movement's coffin. Our Shin Se-min reports.
In a move that'll give authorities much wider scope to crack down on the movement, Egypt's military-backed interim government on Wednesday declared the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist group. The country's deputy prime minister said the move will criminalize and ban the group's activities, including demonstrations. He also accused the Brotherhood of carrying out a suicide bombing on a police headquarters near Cairo that killed 16 people and injured at least 140. The declaration is one of the strongest statements the military-installed government has made against the Brotherhood. This statement has triggered a dramatic escalation in tensions between the authorities and the Brotherhood, which has waged protests on a near-daily basis since a military coup toppled the country's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi, in July. The Brotherhood says the government's declaration is based on false accusations, and it vowed to continue its protests in support of Morsi and the rest of the leadership who remain in jail. The interim government is pursuing a number of criminal cases against Morsi, including one for inciting deadly violence in December 2012. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
A South Korean teenager has signed a long-term contract with one of the top football teams in the world.
And Stephen Che is in the Sports Center with the details of the deal. Hello there.
Hey guys, a new generation of Korean footballers is set to explode onto the scene, and teenage phenom Gi-woong may just headline the next group of stars. The 16-year-old striker and Spanish league giant FC Barcelona agreed to a 5-year extension, which means he'll likely make his pro debut with them. He has been stellar on Barca's juvenile B team and is expected to mature rapidly as he approaches his 20s. He's been touted as the second coming of superstar Lionel Messi, who also made his way through Barcelona's development system. Now moving on to baseball, top closer Oh Seung-hwan and big-hitting slugger Lee Dae-ho may face off in a Japanese preseason game on March 4th. Meanwhile, Oh's Hanshin Tigers and E's SoftBank Hawks are scheduled to meet 4 times in the regular season. Now heading to the greens, top-ranked Park In-bi's historic year has been one of the top stories in golf this year. LPGA.com placed her 7th on the top stories from the 2013 tour, saying she was nearly unstoppable from the moment she became #1. Park's 3 major victories is the most in the modern era, and she was the first South Korean to claim the coveted Player of the Year award, while also topping the money list for the 2nd consecutive year. Now it's time for Thursday's top matchups, and we start in the KBL. The Dongbu Promi hit the road to face the Goyang Orions. The Promi lead the action to start and take the lead into the half. They're up 44-37. Now the Orions show signs of a comeback in the 3rd, but their defense is the issue. They allow the Promi's Kim Ju-sung to score at will in the 2nd half. He ends with 13 points, and Dongbu takes it 89-79 for their first road win in a month. Now leaping to the V-League, the Russian Cash Vespio hosted the Uricard Hanse in Ansan. The Hanse won their last 2 meetings this season, but it's the Vespio with the fast start despite being without Arpad Barodi. They're up 2 sets. Now the 3rd, the Hanse's offense just can't rack up the points. Song Myung-gun scores 15 winners for the Vespio, and they win 3-0. Now that does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
We had snow showers today here in Seoul, and I hear we're in for colder temperatures tomorrow.
That's right. For details, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, what's in store for us tomorrow?
Well, good evening, guys. Tomorrow morning, temperatures will drop 7 degrees compared to today, so bundle up when heading out. Now, for those of you who haven't made New Year's plans yet, the 2013 Poshingak bell ringing ceremony is an event that you should definitely check out. In Korea, bell ringing the Poshingak is a tradition that signals the start of the new year. It's a great chance to count down to 2014 while watching K-pop performance stars and others. Taking a look at the current conditions, the nation is under the influence of a high-pressure system from the north, which is why we're seeing clear skies up north but cloudy ones down south. Now, it's not only the low numbers, but also the strong winds that may give you the winter chills. A strong wind watch has been issued in Jeju and a cold wave watch in the Gyeonggi-do province. Other than that, the mountains in Jeju could get up to 15 centimeters of snow with 1 to 3 centimeters elsewhere. Looking ahead at tomorrow's readings, Seoul's morning low dips to -8 degrees with a high of -2. Meanwhile, Daegu and Gwangju reach 4 and 2 degrees respectively. As for other regions, Jeju starts off the day at 2 degrees before hitting 4 in the afternoon, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang peak at 2 and -9 degrees respectively. Well, that's all for now, but I'll be back with more updates after midnight.
Thanks, Po-kyung. And that's our broadcast on this Thursday night. I'm Yuji Hae in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.